North Node in Sagittarius and in the 9th house. Introduction. With your North Node in Sagittarius in the 9th house, your North Node is doubled down in the house ruled by its same sign. This means that what you have mastered in the past you have overdone to an extreme, and it may be, or may have been, if you are further along your journey, more difficult for you than most to let go of your attachment to logic and develop faith in life. If you have personal planets in fire signs, this may come more naturally to you, but depending on your specific chart, it could be more challenging. Having your North Node in Sagittarius in the 9th house means your South Node is in Gemini in the 3rd house. The sign, Sagittarius, of your North Node signifies the qualities you need to develop, but the house, 9th house, indicates in what area of life you most need to express them. Likewise, the sign, Gemini, of your South Node signifies the qualities you need to let go, but the house, 3rd house, indicates from what area of life you most need to walk away. Qualities to cultivate: freedom and independence, faith and wisdom, truth and being straightforward, impulse, spontaneity, and intuition, expansion and exploration, detachment and not judging, optimism, enthusiasm, and positivity, open-mindedness and expanding horizons, self-trust, adaptability. Where to cultivate them: personal belief system, including religion, spirituality, or philosophy, exploration and a sense of adventure, higher education, long-distance travel, foreign languages and cultures, personal code of ethics, publishing and publicity, higher consciousness, higher mind, solitude, nature. Qualities to let go: rigidity and excessive attachment to logic, facts, and details, doubt and indecision, endless search for information, saying what others want to hear, invalidating intuition, impatience, trusting others over self-gaslighting desire to persuade or convince others, need to say the right thing, people-pleasing and discomfort with disagreement. Where to let go: comfort zone, local community and culture, inherited belief systems, gossip, primary education, the lower mind, social circles, hometown, relationships with siblings and neighbors, over-communication, understanding the axis. Having the North Node in Sagittarius in the 9th house places you on the thought axis. It is the local community, Gemini, 3rd house, global community, Sagittarius, 9th house, axis. It's a mutable axis of communication, learning, and expansion. You may be dogmatic or agnostic, inconsistent or communicative, considerate or adaptable, philosophical or intellectual, a talker or a listener. House 3 is ruled by Gemini and Mercury, the planet of intellect, communication, and short-distance travel. Gemini is all about exchange, exchanging resources as well as ideas. In the 3rd house, Gemini is running about their local community, chatting, or bickering, with siblings, listening deeply, and being neighborly. Gemini gossips, but is known for being smart. Sagittarius is known for being wise. Ruling the 9th house of higher learning, Sagittarius is symbolized by the center, our human attempt to free ourselves from our animal nature, pointing our arrow toward a higher truth. Sagittarius wants to break out of the 3rd house local community and roam freely over the world, collecting ideas and living adventurously, shouting its truth from the mountaintops and never getting trapped or attached. Jupiter, giver of gifts, luck, and expansion, rules Sagittarius. Your life path is about learning to communicate effectively, and speaking your truth in a thoughtful and considerate way. Skepticism versus faith is a major theme of your life. Your karmic classroom is in school and all the ways you educate yourself. Both mutable axes, 3/9 and 6/12, deal with the broader ideas and beliefs we have about life, and both hold a tension between small but practical thinking and big but broad philosophizing. The mutable axes deal with our belief systems, so becoming either dogmatic or directionless are signs of imbalance. With your North Node in the 9th house and Sagittarius, you likely take it all in, but do you know what you truly believe, and why? You've got to get out of your local community and your comfort zone and instead travel, go abroad, and explore radically different ideas about how to live the human experience. You're naturally curious and communicative, but you can be gossipy, duplicitous, and fear commitment, even getting into love triangles or infidelity. You're so attuned to the people around you that you don't know who you are outside of those relationships. You might lack focus and spread yourself too thin. You may get so lost in the details that you don't see the big picture until it's too late. Instead of worrying about the specifics, you've got to develop faith that things will work out for you. Go into nature and see how abundant it is. Everything we need is provided. Develop your own personal philosophy. Cultivate optimism and speak your truth regardless of what others think. Air internalizes things intellectually, fire asserts itself outwardly. Whenever you have an air south node and a fire north node, your natural tendency is to avoid conflict at the expense of your own self-respect. You've got to learn to speak your truth regardless of what others will think. Let go of your need for approval from those close to you and embrace philosophical independence and an open mind. Truth is the central power of this axis, learning to see your own personal truth as just as valid as others' truths, and being able to live and let live. You must see the validity of all viewpoints. Both Gemini and Sagittarius deal with hubris, and both are intellectual, abstract thinkers. Understanding why you think and believe is just as important as what you think and believe. Yours is a search for meaning. Once you find it, you must find an effective way to communicate it. Your life lessons come through communication, community, local, national, or global, and the degree to which you stand up for your beliefs or learn to have strong opinions, lightly held. The thought axis is about knowledge versus wisdom, skepticism versus faith, observing versus reflecting, speaking versus listening, and knowing where you come from versus understanding the world out there. Every axis is about balance. The thought axis isn't about focusing solely on your own perspective and community or getting lost in the grand scheme of things, but learning to see how each part is valid and fits into the whole. It means having your own perspective while respecting the perspective of others, including all living beings. It means knowing when to listen and when to talk. When you master this axis, you will have a healthy way of communicating with others, belief without dogma, and learning without limits but with direction. Ultimately, it is about balance. Perhaps you are already on your way. Your quest, higher truth. With your North Node, NN, in Sagittarius in the 9th house, your quest is truth, yes, with a capital T. Your resource for achieving it is your incredibly sharp mind and deep desire to learn. You want to possess a higher or absolute truth so that no one can disagree with you and everyone will be in harmony, a truth that unites people rather than dividing them. Deep down, you believe this mental security will guarantee social harmony and therefore you will always be accepted. The problem is that your method of achieving this goal is no longer working for you. You're accustomed to gathering the facts, presenting them logically, and persuading everyone to agree with you. But this only comes across as manipulative, controlling, and insincere, and rather than believing you, people distrust you and invalidate your perspective. There are two underlying issues here. The first is that you've been trying to access a higher truth through the lower mind. Logic, facts, and tangible reality are not the whole of reality. We know, for instance, that there are light spectrums we cannot see, like X-ray and infrared, and scents we cannot smell, like many animals can. Quantum physics is showing us just how much of reality is beyond the grasp of our logical, Newtonian approach. You haven't been able to convince others of the truth because you yourself haven't learned how to access it, yet. The second is that you can't get the validation you want from others until you learn to validate yourself. People sense your desperation and need to be validated and instinctively rebel against it. It's only once you become rock solid in your own self-belief that others will feel your unshakable confidence and naturally follow you because they sense your certainty. Ironically, as always, we only get what we want once we no longer want it. The bottom line is that you will never be able to gather enough information to convince others, or yourself, of your tentative conclusions. You will only be able to access an unshakable higher truth once you go within, get radically in touch with yourself, and experience the universal truth at the heart of every living being. Your past, strengths, and excesses. Don't worry, you don't have to leave everything about the South Node behind. Again, it's about balance. The trick in balancing out the South Node is to embody the positive aspects while leaving behind the excessive and negative qualities. With a South Node in Gemini in the 3rd house, gathering information and leveraging logic comes naturally to you, but this is not your path this time around. In the past you relied heavily on logic and information, trusting data over your gut feelings even when it came to topics that required intuition. This led you to information overload, a cluttered mind that couldn't make sense of anything because there was too much to make sense of. You couldn't see the forest for the trees, unable to solve your problems because you were too narrow-minded to see the big picture. You spent many past lives in positions where in order to survive, you had to understand how other people think. You were likely a teacher, journalist, speaker, or salesperson. You came into this life with a talent for seeing through others' eyes, so much so that you forgot how to see through your own. Over lifetimes of excess, you've lost touch with your own truth. Now you need to connect with your true self again, re-establish your spiritual connection, and rediscover who you are. You possess an inherent gift for understanding others' mindsets, and this enables you to give them one of the greatest emotional gifts of all, validation. That is, when you are not busy invalidating their feelings with your countless facts. And because you're so good at understanding others, you can easily foresee probable outcomes. Naturally, you have a cheerful and optimistic outlook, but overthinking leads you into pessimism that becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. You have an overactive mind that tends to consume itself rather than help you. As you learn to relax your mind and develop a sense of faith, your innate optimism and confidence will re-emerge. It may be easier for you to uplift others than to uplift yourself, but you have to try. You also bring incredible communication skills into this life, unless other aspects in the chart conflict with this. A strong possibility is there is much karma around communication. You certainly have the gift of gab and can create connection easily, cultivating a light-hearted, accepting atmosphere. You are most at risk of missing the big picture, not seeing the forest for the trees. As a result, you lack a deep sense of meaning and routinely invalidate your own feelings and intuition. It may be difficult for you to commit yourself to one particular thing, person, place, or path. Even if you stay in your hometown, it may be difficult for you to settle down, particularly when it comes to a career path or belief system. You are very knowledgeable, but not necessarily wise. Gemini is a jack of all trades, master of none, and while this versatility has served you in the past, your soul yearns to become an expert in something, to know one thing deeply, even if it is yourself. You may like to stay busy, always being productive, on the go, and connecting with others. South Node Gemini third house people are often very talkative, get along well with others, and can be social butterflies. While you can certainly get things done, sometimes you spend the whole day working and find at the end that you didn't move the needle on your big goals. You got caught up in so many little tasks that you lost sight of your higher purpose. This busyness also serves to keep your mind distracted from bigger, deeper issues and feelings. You use data, information collecting, and productivity to avoid yourself. You may be the type of person who always has an audiobook or podcast on in the background while you're doing something else, just so you don't have to hear yourself think. You may often get lost in a sea of doubt, not knowing what to believe because you genuinely see the validity of every position. As a result, people may see you as flighty and superficial. They may feel they cannot rely on you to get the job done or be there when they need you. They may even see you as duplicitous and untrustworthy because to them, your tendency to jump from one conclusion to a seemingly opposing one makes you seem fake or insincere. Of course, it's not that you're lying, it's just that you see every angle. But it's your task in this lifetime to pick one perspective and stick with it, without invalidating others. You may have a sensitive mind that gets mentally overstimulated by information overload to the point where making effective decisions becomes difficult. You may be so bound in logic and detail that you neglect your intuition and higher mind. But any logical position, taken to its logical extreme, becomes paradoxically illogical. This leads you to doubt and confusion about what to believe. The trick in balancing out the South Node is to embody the positive aspects while leaving behind the negative qualities. You are tempted to continue gathering more information, but it will not work for you this time around. By preserving the gold in the shadow of the South Node while reigning in its success, you can use it as a healthy foundation from which to pursue your North Node purpose. Time for a new tactic. While this strategy served you very well in your early life or in past lives, it will now backfire on you. Instead, you need to take a step back from all the data and details. You'll become much better at problem solving when you learn to step back, free your mind, and get in touch with your intuition and the big picture. When the ego weeps for what it has lost, the soul rejoices for what it has found. The North Node in Sagittarius in the 9th house is all about expansion, especially expanding the higher mind. What is the higher mind? It is the part of us not trapped and mired in ego and the microcosm, but the detached observer who understands yet never judges. It is not the thinker, but the one who is aware of the thinking. You must adopt a more optimistic outlook. You've spent the past bogged down in facts and details which only lead to confirmation bias of a negative outlook. Once you find it, your optimism and enthusiasm will be contagious, making you an inspiring friend and even leader. You are here to indulge your desire to learn for learning's sake rather than reaching an end goal. It is best for you to follow your curiosity and impulses. However, this is not about gathering more information and getting overwhelmed. It's about loosening up, becoming more open-minded, and instead of broadening your knowledge, deepening your understanding. There is a lot that you know, but very little you understand. By remaining open-minded, you will be able to welcome in new information even if it conflicts with your existing beliefs. You have to be willing to step outside of your intellectual comfort zone. Much of this actually has to do with getting out of the lower mind and into the higher mind, connecting to your higher self, spiritual nature, and esoteric truth. You must move from the realm of knowledge to the realm of wisdom. With the North Node in Sagittarius in the 9th house, exploring different philosophies is part of your karmic path. However, you may hold too rigidly to certain ways of thinking, thereby closing yourself off from new perspectives. Remember that good philosophy is strong opinions, lightly held. You must learn to balance your commitment to truth with open-mindedness and cultivate a detached, tolerant, and non-judgmental attitude. This will also help you become more adaptable to changing circumstances and environments. While you may be attached to your hometown or family of origin, embracing adventure and new horizons is what will expand your consciousness. You're meant to be an independent thinker, leader, and pioneer, forging new paths that haven't been explored before. Others will come along behind you and study the details. You're meant to blaze the trail. Anytime you try to follow a traditional, established path based on logic and facts, you'll be off track and will likely encounter blocks and obstacles. But when you introduce your unique individuality and originality, following your gut, you'll call in great abundance. Through this exploration you will develop a profound faith in something you may not be able to articulate logically, but feel in your heart and soul. You will only alleviate your anxiety and stress once you allow yourself to believe in something bigger than yourself, without having to back it up with logic, facts, and details. This comes down to understanding that reality isn't only what we see. Even physicists and biologists know that. In the past you'd say I'll believe it when I see it, but this lifetime is about I'll see it when I believe it. You are learning just how much we create our own reality by projecting our preconceived ideas onto the world and behaving accordingly, bringing about our own self-fulfilling prophecies. Instead of distracting yourself by staying busy, you need to slow down, tune into yourself, and focus on the truth within. Simply embracing silence throughout your day, turning off the radio, audiobook, or podcast while cleaning or driving to work, will relieve you of some of your stress and anxiety. You may not realize how much of your mental and emotional energy is being drained by constantly taking in new information. You will most benefit from solitude, especially in nature or while traveling. When you learn to go with the flow, both internally and externally, you will discover new and exciting truths about yourself and the world, and life will bring you enormous benefits. Sagittarius is also the archetypal teacher. You may be stuck in a student mentality, never feeling like you know enough or are ready for the real world. But this lifetime is all about stepping into your own authority and recognizing that you have much knowledge and wisdom to share with others. You may resist leaving the nest due to a strong attachment to the place where you grew up. It is hard for you to let go of the relationships you've built with siblings, neighbors, and your local community, or perhaps life has already brought you conflict with these people in order to push you out the door. You will likely do very well in a foreign country or international environment. Anything that involves distributing ideas on a mass scale, publishing, the internet, etc., or psychic work can bring you great rewards, both financially and emotionally. One beautiful thing about this placement is that developing faith in yourself and a higher truth is part of your destiny. Before you begin, I cannot emphasize enough that this process of psychological evolution does not require you to completely abandon your South Node and run willy-nilly into your North Node. When people do this, they often misinterpret their lessons and go off track. For instance, Early on I tried to actively cultivate the qualities of my own North Node, but I still had so many habits, good and bad, in excess, from my South Node that I hadn't fully understood or gotten control of yet. Those South Node tendencies actively undermined and inhibited my ability to pursue my North Node, even though I truly believed that's what I was doing. So instead we must first seek to understand our South Node. Every quality, and every sign, has positive and negative manifestations, depending on its context, how it is used, and how evolved the person using it is. For example, with your South Node in Gemini in the 3rd house, you're incredibly communicative, but these communication skills can also manifest as gossip and manipulation. It's not about suppressing yourself and never speaking to anyone again, it's about understanding when and how to leverage your personal truth. Maybe you don't need to tell everything you're thinking to your new friend, but you could help them out by mediating a conflict or explaining someone else's point of view to them, helping them reach a better understanding. Even more easily, we can misunderstand the lessons of our North Node, precisely because it is the most foreign to us, unless we have personal planets in the same placement or element, which makes it easier. In your case, someone with a North Node in Sagittarius in the 9th house may think they just need to throw caution to the wind and move to another country, but this would be an immature expression of that placement. Instead, waiting and looking for lessons about exploring other cultures and ways of life is a healthier and more effective way to start. Then when they discover a country or language they're naturally interested in, they'll develop some basic knowledge and understanding of that culture before taking the leap to move there. Of course, this isn't a linear process. We don't check our lessons off one by one on a list until we get to the reward at the end, and we don't simply move from one end of the axis to the other, though I may sometimes write it that way for the sake of clarity. In reality, our life is our best teacher. Our life is constantly bringing us lessons and reflecting our evolutionary stage back to us, showing us what we've mastered and what we still need to learn. Even more important than anything I've written in this book is that you judiciously reflect on how the themes of your nodal axis have manifested in your life specifically and in the people you've encountered, especially when there is a pattern, and there are always patterns. And just because a lesson repeats doesn't mean you didn't get it right the first time. It often means you're now dealing with the same subject at a higher level. Pay attention to your life. Both the South Node and North Node want the same thing, but they approach the desire from opposite perspectives. In the past, we've been pursuing our soul's deepest desire with the approach of the South Node, and the experience of never really getting what we want is what builds the pressure to pursue the North Node. The North Node path does not feel comfortable, safe, or familiar to us. It may even disgust us sometimes. But life will repeatedly deny us our deep desire until we learn and integrate the missing end of the polarity, the North Node we've left underdeveloped. In your case, your instinct to over-communicate only causes you to alienate yourself, until you stop talking like a Gemini and start reflecting like a Sagittarius. The only way you can win in this life is to cultivate your own personal truth, while respecting others' truths as well. Oftentimes we do not begin to turn towards our North Node until we've truly exhausted the strategies of our South Node. At that point, we have explored all the positive and negative effects of our South Node habits and instincts, and we're able to use them with discernment instead of compulsion. But this point may come only when we feel completely defeated by our life. Exhausted, we're finally forced to try a new strategy, and we end up gaining even more than our deep desire, more than we ever dreamed. The fulfillment of our North Node promise doesn't look like becoming an embodiment of only our North Node, but instead embodying the best qualities of both the South and the North Node. From knowledge to wisdom. South Node Gemini 3rd house people are used to pursuing their goals through deductive reasoning and their awareness of others' perspectives. Judiciously weighing all the pros and cons with a logical approach led them to the right answers. In the past. But not anymore. South Node Gemini 3rd house people are afraid of abandoning logic, but it leads them to counterproductive overthinking. What will work better for them now is inductive reasoning. Logic works well for figuring out how to implement a decision, but the decision itself must be based on intuitive knowing. This is actually the only way they can feel confident about their choices, because the more information they collect, the harder it is to make up their mind. They have to actually feel what feels certain to them. When they base decisions purely on the facts, they change their mind when new information becomes available. But their gut feeling doesn't change. For example, a South Node Gemini 3rd house person might literally be having digestive problems but can't figure out why. They may read all the books they can on the subject and try different diets, but nothing helps. However, if they just followed an elimination diet, eliminating all potential allergens for a few weeks and then reintroducing them one by one, paying attention to what triggers their symptoms, they would figure out their problem by literally listening to their gut. These folks are learning to tune out others' opinions and tune into themselves. They are so used to backing every decision up with the facts that they tend to over-justify themselves when they don't have to, which only makes them seem defensive and insecure. They're afraid that if they just state their position, others will oppose it, and they're especially afraid of saying no. But they need to learn, and really practice, that no is a complete sentence. They don't owe everyone an explanation for every little choice they make, they can just do what feels right to them. When they stop over-explaining themselves, they'll be surprised by how accepting others are. This works in the reverse too. South Node Gemini 3rd house people usually want an explanation for everything, which can be exhausting for those around them. Very often, others feel criticized or invalidated by their constant questioning. It can even be harmful to the South Node Gemini 3rd house person. For instance, when someone disagrees with them, they demand an explanation and the other person convinces them of a more negative or harmful viewpoint. These folks inadvertently invite pessimism into their lives. It's better for them to simply take others at face value and let the small stuff slide. They don't need to know every detail or understand every nuance. What they need to focus on is the big picture. Sometimes South Node Gemini 3rd house people feel frustrated or lonely because no one wants to listen to them. This is usually because they're spouting off a bunch of facts and information, or gossip, without relaying the underlying meaning or point of it all. They may excitedly tell someone all about a topic only to have the person ask, "So what?" The thing is, not everyone is interested in knowledge for knowledge's sake, and that's okay. What South Node Gemini 3rd house people are learning is that knowledge is not useful unless it can be put to greater use, by giving us a sense of meaning. In fact, there is a funny story about Gustave Flaubert, author of Madame Bovary, that relates to this. He belonged to the first generation that experienced mass media in the form of newspapers, and he couldn't stand them. He understood very well how media could make people stupid. In fact, he had a special term of this kind of stupidity, la bêtise. For him, there was a difference between ignorance and idiocy. The first doesn't know and the second doesn't understand what he knows. The character of Homais in Madame Bovary is meant to be such an example, and Flaubert's Dictionary of Received Ideas contains his careful catalogue of the dumbest ideas spread by mass media. And guess what? Gustave Flaubert was a Sagittarius. He also considered himself a global citizen rather than a Frenchman, writing, "I am a soul brother to everything that lives, to the giraffe and to the crocodile as much as to the man." Just imagine what he would think of social media. South Node Gemini 3rd house people have powerful minds and often process information much more rapidly than the average person. As a result, they're often ahead of the natural flow, and they can be very impatient when others struggle to catch up to them. They've actually got to learn to slow down a little. Their tendency to always be 2 steps ahead often means they skipped a step or two, and may be proceeding based on assumptions rather than intuition. This is part of why they become mentally overstimulated. These folks can live in a constant state of urgency and stress, always trying to get ahead to the next thing. Their mind is trying to solve not just the problems they have, but all the problems they might have. As Theodore Roethke said, "A mind too active is no mind at all." This mental overwhelm also happens because South Node Gemini 3rd house people are very uncomfortable with boredom and prefer to keep themselves distracted. They are the types to always be multitasking or listening to a video, podcast, or audiobook while doing something else, so they don't have to listen to their own thoughts. Eventually, the habit of tuning themselves out wears on them. They don't feel listened to, so they feel invalidated, and they get confused because they don't really know themselves. This is where tools like meditation and exercise, especially outdoors, can really soothe them. So can writing because it helps them get all the thoughts out of their minds. More than anyone else, detoxing from media of all kinds, audio, video, even books, can really help these folks. There are many resources, journal prompts, and references for this in the North Node Sagittarius 9th House Workbook on northnodesignandhouse.com. Community and siblings. For better or worse, South Node Gemini 3rd house people have intense karma related to their local community, neighbors, and siblings. It's possible they either fit in well with their hometown culture or they feel like an alien there. It's love or hate. Whether positive or negative, though likely a mixture of both, their feelings about their hometown tend to be strong. Either way, it is highly necessary for them to break free. That doesn't mean they have to cut all ties, but staying in or near the nest for too long only holds them back. But it may be extremely difficult for them to leave. They may end up caring for one or more of their siblings and have a strong psychic connection to them, even if they lost them early on in life. Sometimes South Node Gemini third house people have an insatiable need for attention and external validation, which leads them to accumulate too many superficial relationships. They are so friendly and fun to be around that they easily make friends. These folks may have had very social early lives, but there comes a point when socializing no longer fulfills them emotionally. They only gain clarity when they strike out on their own or at least carve out time for solitude. When it comes to friendship, they need to focus on quality rather than quantity. They have to learn to distinguish between a friend and an acquaintance and avoid getting too close to people too quickly. It's often said that we are the average of the 5 people we spend the most time with, so it's important to make sure we surround ourselves with people we respect and admire, and who inspire the best in us. Developing authenticity and a more direct style of communication can also help them weed out people with whom they are incompatible. Because these folks are so chatty and nice, they easily accumulate a lot of nice acquaintances with whom they can always find something in common. Their ability to connect with others is truly beautiful, but sometimes it is indiscriminate, and often they get burned by trusting the wrong people too much. This happens when they are not communicating consciously enough, that is to say, when they're not being entirely authentic. It's not always that South Node Gemini third house people are fake per se, but they simply don't see the point of creating potential conflict over a small disagreement. However, their fear of conflict is often overblown. It's entirely possible, and actually very important, to respectfully disagree with others and still be able to carry on a conversation and a cordial relationship. It helps these folks to keep a diary of white lies, things they say to make others feel good rather than what they truly feel and believe. As they do this, they will begin to recognize how much they compromise their own values for the sake of harmony and compassion. They will notice patterns that illuminate themes about what areas of life they tend to gloss over, and this can give them important information about what they feel insecure about sharing. They can then use this as a guide for growth, and begin practicing being honest about those topics. As they do so, they will be able to weed out the people who don't really belong in their lives, and they'll be surprised that others accept and agree with them more than they anticipate. In fact, it's often a relief for others to hear the truth from North Node Sagittarius 9th house people. While these are communication skills to practice wherever they are, it helps North Node Sagittarius 9th house people to go far. Staying too close to home keeps them stuck in the same routines, mentality, and ways of relating, and in the same emotions too. They may have to travel far away in order to find the peace they seek. They have to detach from their inherited environment long enough to observe the world and draw their own conclusions about it. It's only once they step back, or away, that they can see the whole picture. This doesn't mean they can never come back. It's helpful for them to get some distance, see things from a wider perspective, and then return home with a renewed vision. But they have to get away first. Social harmony versus authenticity. South Node Gemini third house people tend to value good manners and social harmony, always mindful of social grace, tact, and discretion. They don't understand when others are rude or self-sabotagingly blunt. But they tend to take good manners to an extreme, and be overly sensitive to others' opinions and overly attached to correct social behavior. These folks tend to be so focused on not hurting or offending anyone that they end up hurting themselves. They prioritize others' feelings with a subconscious expectation that others will return the favor. But nobody owes them anything. In fact, they owe themselves their own truth, comfort, and well-being. Instead of taking responsibility for making others comfortable, they need to take responsibility for making themselves comfortable. That means prioritizing self-respect, which often means behaving authentically even if it causes them to lose face. Unfortunately, South Node Gemini third house people care so much about what others think that they can inadvertently infect their friends and family members with their own social anxiety and judgmental attitude. When they talk indiscriminately about their own judgments and attitude, the people around them internalize it. It can be very damaging to their loved ones. They need to be careful not to triangulate, that is, Talk to a third party about something someone else said or did. It's essential for North Node Sagittarius 9th house people to deal with the affected party directly and not to go behind their back talking to someone else about the issue. This only exacerbates the problem, foments distrust, and creates social conflict as it draws another person unnecessarily into their conflict. They need to approach the relevant person directly without involving others, and be brave enough to share their authentic thoughts and feelings. This may involve being vulnerable. Usually when they finally develop the courage to communicate a vulnerability, they learn that something they took personally was not about them at all, just a result of the other person's mood and lack of awareness. Taking a direct approach to communicate their problem, and framing it as a question rather than an assumption, allows them to both be authentic and resolve their insecurity, ultimately making them more confident. For example, when they are talking to a friend and an expression comes across their friend's face which they perceive as resistant to what they're saying, instead of assuming or shutting down, they can simply ask, "Hey, you had a look on your face just now that seemed like you disagree. What do you think?" Then their friend can inform them of whether they're correct or not, and give an explanation. Depersonalizing situations whenever possible can be very helpful for the North Node Sagittarius 9th house person. The thing is, being so hyper-aware of how others might be perceiving them drives the South Node Gemini 3rd house person crazy. They tend to be overwhelmed with emotional information and feel very vulnerable and afraid of judgment. The issue is that they are valuing others' judgments and opinions over their own, giving others a level of intellectual respect that they haven't necessarily earned. We should always care about how others feel, but we should be more skeptical of what people think. They can make mistakes, be deeply flawed, and change their minds easily. What matters is what we think of ourselves. When North Node Sagittarius 9th house people shift their emphasis from respecting others' opinions to respecting themselves, they liberate themselves into a freer, lighter, more authentic life. From small picture to big picture. South Node Gemini 3rd house people have already mastered the art of gathering information and focusing on their immediate surroundings. They believe that if they just collect all the facts, they'll never be caught off guard by life, they'll always have an answer to the questions life poses them. They feel intellectually insecure and inadequate, and may pursue high degrees in order to safeguard their ego, or else resent the lack of opportunity to do so. More than merely communicating the facts, North Node Sagittarius 9th house people are learning to give meaning to the data. They've gathered all the information, but they still get overwhelmed and can't make sense of it. What they need to do now is step back, look at the big picture, and connect the dots. A fantastic symbol of this is a graphic designer creating infographics to communicate hard data to the masses. In fact, Sagittarius is all about mass communication. Moving from the South Node in Gemini to the North Node in Sagittarius is also about moving from short-term thinking to long-term thinking. They will find that when they choose what is convenient over what is right, they face long-term consequences that severely outweigh any benefits they might have initially enjoyed. This is about integrity as well as commitment. North Node Sagittarius 9th house people are learning to keep their word, and to communicate clearly and honestly if anything changes. They have a tendency to begin many projects, pursuits, and relationships, but when the excitement wanes, their lack of commitment causes them to abandon what they've started, and they run the risk of never accomplishing anything. This is the classic jack of all trades, master of none. Moving from the South Node in Gemini to the North Node in Sagittarius is also about moving from the mentality of student to that of teacher, from gathering information from without and trusting external authorities to becoming an authority oneself. It begins with becoming one's own inner authority. Ultimately, Sagittarius is not a jack of all trades, it is the quintessential master. It is a good practice for these folks to choose one or two main passions and focus on mastering those. In this life, they need to go deep instead of broad. That doesn't mean they have to give up all their interests, but if they limit themselves to, say, 2 to 5 pursuits, they can make progress in each of them on a routine basis. Because they have such an active mind, they get bored easily and need more stimulation than most people. For example, let's say the North Node Sagittarius 9th house people has 3 main interests and a project for pursuing each of them. They can work on one in the morning, one in the afternoon, and another in the evening. Then the next day they can go back to the first one. With this method they make progress every day while still maintaining their interest and enthusiasm. This may not be a daily cycle, but they may switch projects monthly or seasonally. The key is not to abandon a project once they get bored, but simply return to it when they're ready. As long as they keep returning to a project until it is complete, they will develop mastery and a sense of accomplishment that boosts their confidence. Otherwise, South Node Gemini third house people are prone to getting discouraged because they spread their energy in too many directions at once and don't progress on anything. Sagittarius is also uninterested in the superficial. It wants to discover profound truths and deep philosophies of life. They need to shift from asking who, what, where, and when to simply asking why. This is how they'll begin to alleviate their anxiety and overwhelm. Investigating philosophy, spirituality, psychology, and the big questions of life both fulfills and soothes them. Once they begin to notice how everything is connected, they'll start to sense their own place in the world and feel more secure in that place. They are shifting from being a journalist who collects and reports the facts to being a poet who illuminates deeper meanings. Communication. In addition to their tendency to provide or demand excessive explanations, South Node Gemini third house people also have a habit of debating others. But they don't approach it as a detached, stimulating exchange, they approach it as a competition they want to win. Their goal is to persuade the other person and have their point of view validated. They're not expanding their consciousness, they're just trying to control someone. Other people sense this and instinctively rebel or pull away. This isn't always conscious, however. Very often, these folks have a habit of working their problems out verbally, through conversational exchange. They may bring up a topic or problem just to bounce ideas around with someone else. With the right people, this can work, but they have to be discerning. Not everyone is safe to confide in, unfortunately. Oftentimes, others will interpret their venting as an attempt to convince them of something and again, they'll pull away. Since they find security through social rapport, South Node Gemini third house people tend to harbor a fear of being misunderstood, so they try to be very precise with the words they use. The mental effort they're constantly making to choose the exact right words can be exhausting. The problem is, they think everyone else is being as careful as they are. They're totally not. As a result, South Node Gemini third house people take others' words too literally and miss the meaning. They are operating on a surface level of communication instead of tuning into the intention underneath. Their intellectual approach tends to be counterproductive, ironically becoming an obstacle to understanding. Their fear of being misunderstood can also lead them to social anxiety, a hangover kind of social anxiety when they pore over their memories of recent conversations, thinking of all the possible mistakes they could have made, how their words could have been misunderstood, or the many things someone else's words could have meant. Soon they convince themselves that they committed some kind of social faux pas or that someone no longer likes them. Sometimes they'll even reach out to the person to try to elaborate on something they said that the other person doesn't even remember, simply because they fear being misunderstood. But this becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy, especially when they rush to try to correct a problem that never existed in the first place. By trying to fix or over-explain something they said which the other person didn't give a second thought to, they actually draw attention to it and cause the person to doubt them. When they find themselves in this state of social anxiety, it's best for them to remember their North Node in Sagittarius, take a step back, zoom out, and look at the big picture. Likely they've been fixating on just one or two sentences that were part of a longer conversation that was part of a longer evening of more conversations, most of which no one fully remembers. As Eleanor Roosevelt, a Sagittarius ascendant, wisely said, "You wouldn't worry so much about what others think of you if you realized how seldom they do." Of course, everyone is too busy thinking about themselves and their own social anxiety. When they do take a step back and get in touch with their own authentic truth, they may have an insight, and immediately want to share it with someone else. But if the person disagrees with them, the South Node Gemini third house person instinctively tries to see it from the other person's point of view, and since they're so sensitive to others' perspectives, they become insecure even if the other person hasn't invalidated them at all. They are learning to keep their ideas to themselves for a while before they share them with others. This way they develop confidence and clarity in their truth, strengthening it before introducing it to others. While their capacity to understand other people is beautiful, valid, and desperately needed in society, when they don't learn to rein it in they can really hurt themselves. Because they process everything verbally, it's best for North Node Sagittarius 9th house people to take time to journal and get in touch with their own authentic ideas and beliefs before engaging in conversation with others about those ideas. More than any other placement, A journaling habit can really help these folks. They have so much information and arguments rattling around in their minds that they get very stressed out. Writing it down diligently every day can help them empty out the clutter and get in touch with their own inner voice. Once they hear what their inner voice has to say, their need to debate, communicate, and interrogate others lessens considerably. They just need to be heard, but they need to be heard by their own selves. Gossip is social violence. Sadly, South Node Gemini third house people are prone to gossip. In fact, they are victims of gossip as much as they are perpetrators, if not more, and unfortunately this is due to past life karma they have accumulated. These folks often seriously hurt people in the past through their undisciplined tongue. More than any other placement, they need to remember, loose lips sink ships. South Node Gemini third house people must guard themselves carefully against gossip, especially their own habit of gossiping. Often they don't even see what they're saying as gossip, they're just sharing relevant stories about people they know. What can help is simply to remove the name of the person from the story, because usually the reason they're telling it is for the topic or the deeper truth the story reveals about human nature. At other times they are simply venting and trying to analyze a social situation to alleviate their anxiety about it, but this almost never helps in the long term, especially because they don't always discern who is the right person to confide in. Because it is relatively easy for them to understand others, they can build friendships quickly and easily, and this leads them to get too close too fast, before they've had an opportunity to slow down and tune into their own instincts about their new friend. Then they end up confiding in this person, who later betrays them through spreading gossip. They do not always mean to gossip, but it always comes back to bite them. While it's true that gossip is a valid social skill and much of its denigration comes from historic misogyny, the word gossip used to indicate a female friend, and demeaning this word worked to devalue the quality and validity of conversation among women. It is a powerful tool that we must all handle with care. When it gets out of hand, or worse, begins with a lie or mere speculation, it can destroy lives, careers, families, and whole communities. Malevolent gossip is a form of social violence that can hurt others just as much as other forms of violence. Still, we are a hypersocial species hardwired to talk about social interactions. On the plus side, gossip helps us regulate group dynamics, understand how others may judge us, give us insight into human nature generally and the people in our lives specifically, regulate our own behavior, and build trust. In fact, most gossip is neither positive nor negative, but neutral. And by the way, it's used by people of all genders. Everyone gossips. We would not be able to sustain our societies without discussing socially relevant information. So how do we do it responsibly? Luckily, this is not a difficult problem to solve, it just takes some discipline and the development of a few new habits. First, let's delineate what positive and negative gossip is. Positive gossip: social information shared by a trustworthy person in order to help someone. For example, if the South Node Gemini third house person hears that their friend's new love interest is a serial cheater, letting their friend know would be positive gossip, especially if it is tempered with "this is just what I heard, so take it with a grain of salt." They are letting their friend know, not to hurt the other person, but to protect their friend. Prosocial gossip like this helps lower overall exploitation in social groups. In fact, the threat of being gossiped about can deter bad behavior. Negative gossip is usually unnecessary and selfish, used to advance one's own social standing, especially if it makes you look like you're in the know and the gossip itself has no utility to the listener. For example, if the South Node Gemini third house person learns that a friend of theirs slept with someone and shares that with the whole friend group even though none of those people know the other person, then they have betrayed their friend's trust to the group even though the group has no use for that information. It just illustrates that the South Node Gemini third house person is in the know. That's pointless and hurtful, negative gossip. So how can we gossip responsibly? When it comes to sharing something positive about someone that shows them in a good light, that can be a good things to share. When it comes to others' antisocial behavior, South Node Gemini third house people can follow a few simple rules. First, they must honestly consider their motives. Do they personally gain anything from sharing the information, even if it's just social power? Second, they must consider their audience. Does it actually help the listener to hear this? Is it necessary to share the information? Third, it helps to stick to the facts, to avoid exaggerating or making judgments. Like everything in life, simply bringing awareness into the present moment and how we're feeling can curb impulsivity, like the urge to gossip. However, it's highly likely that South Node Gemini third house people will be tempted to gossip about situations they're personally involved in, such as conflicts. In these instances, they must prioritize direct communication and avoid triangulating. This can be uncomfortable because they may be used to passive-aggressive behavior, indirect comments, and even manipulation. It may simply be how their family of origin communicated, so it can be hard to become aware of these patterns, let alone change them. Often they will avoid conflict simply by manipulating the other person into believing what they believe, but this is a lose-lose situation because then no one's authentic truth is honored. When they manipulate people into believing their own beliefs, they're failing to communicate bravely and authentically by simply saying what they want. Deep down, they know they have not only betrayed the other person but they've betrayed themselves. Direct communication is the key to North Node Sagittarius 9th house people's success. It's possible to be assertive without being aggressive, and distinguishing between the two is helpful for them. Assertiveness doesn't involve anger, it often just involves stating the facts rather plainly, even if the fact is that someone made them angry. They don't have to say it in an angry tone, just state the facts. Communicating this directly can make these folks feel very vulnerable, but it's incredibly healing for them. They have spent so much time not truly being themselves with others, and it's time for them to reveal their authentic selves, one conversation at a time. If they practice communicating directly, authentically, and yes, vulnerably with the person with whom they're in conflict, they can dissolve a lot of their social karma. This is scary, but that's precisely the point. North Node Sagittarius in the 9th house is all about higher truth, and these folks are here to learn to speak their own authentic truth, especially when it requires their courage. At the end of the day, asking ourselves simply what will give us more self-respect versus what will deplete our self-respect is an excellent guide. We can do hard things. Manipulation and dishonesty. Sometimes South Node Gemini third house people are tempted to use their innate understanding of others to their advantage by manipulating people, but this is playing with karmic fire, it always backfires. They're not always doing so maliciously, of course. Sometimes they simply see a situation unfolding that's not in their favor, so they try to get ahead of it by convincing others of their own position. But they can only convince others for so long, they have to continue the manipulation in order to maintain the upper hand. And no one can play that game forever. Moreover, when they slip into this bad karmic habit, they inevitably attract an opponent stronger than themselves. All that person has to do to win is to be honest, thereby exposing the South Node Gemini third house person's manipulation. It's not the way for them to win. Sometimes the deception is nothing major or dramatic, though. Sometimes they are simply trying to be tactful, but when they look more deeply into their own motivations, they realize they're really trying to change the other person or trick them into doing something. In fact, oftentimes, these folks simply slip in some white lies, which can be, to them, simply a habit of saying little positive things or whatever will deepen their connection with someone. But this is another habit that snowballs into a bigger problem than it's worth. Soon they feel imprisoned by their own dishonesty, and the discrepancy between their words and the truth damage their reputation and relationships. In the past, their tactfulness has been an intelligent strategy that helped them achieve their goals, and they often don't understand people who shoot themselves in the foot by being honest. They might even put the person down for saying the honest thing instead of the smart thing, because now their friend didn't get what they wanted, and the South Node Gemini third house person sees this as stupidity and self-sabotage. But they don't understand the value and virtue of sacrificing what we want for the sake of our higher truth. That's because they see so many points of view that they don't hold any of them as sacred, and thus use a variety of perspectives to their advantage. But in doing so, they, too, make a sacrifice, they betray their true selves. These folks really cannot get away with a lack of integrity in this life, especially with lies. They're learning that even the most innocent white lies break a higher universal law. Very often, they are thinking short-term instead of long-term, which leads them to moral mistakes. Lying leads them to confusion about their own nature, distrust of self and others, isolation, anxiety, and decreased personal power. More than any other placement, truth shall set these folks free. Deep down, South Node Gemini third house people's habit of lying and manipulating others comes from a fear that people won't accept them as they are. But that's only because they don't accept themselves as they are. In fact, they may not even know who they are. What they're missing is trust in themselves and trust in life itself. Since they don't trust themselves, others subconsciously sense this and mirror their distrust. The more they learn to live in their own authentic truth, the easier it becomes for them to trust that others are doing the same. Very often they fear that everyone is out to manipulate and lie to them, but they are only projecting their own shadow onto others. South Node Gemini 3rd house people sometimes lack faith in the goodness of life and humanity, believing their success depends entirely on their ability to outmaneuver others, but this lack of trust only betrays the fact that they are the dishonest, manipulative ones, and they simply assume everyone else is operating like they are. Of course, this is not so. There are genuinely authentic, honest, and sincere people in the world who are not constantly trying to manipulate others. Once North Node Sagittarius 9th house people get in touch with their own truth and accept themselves wholeheartedly, they will begin to see that others do the same. This is the only way for them to achieve freedom. It's easier said than done, and it's not an overnight success. What will always help North Node Sagittarius 9th house people win is their own truth. When they prioritize honesty and truth, even if it seems counterintuitive, they will usually come out on top, or at least with their integrity intact. They have to have faith in the big picture, that everything is working out for their highest good even if they can't see it, and that whatever or whomever is removed from their life is ultimately a bullet they've dodged. When they consciously choose to place their faith in life's highest good, the positive path will reveal itself. Deep communication. South Node Gemini 3rd house people easily see others' points of view, but only superficially. There is a limit to how deep they naturally go. Because they're not in touch with their own inner truth, they assume that others aren't in touch with theirs either, so they approach everyone with a degree of skepticism. Instead, they must learn to trust what others are saying about their own deep motives, look more deeply into themselves, and practice deep communication. Superficial communication is generally selfish. It's usually based on pleasing the other person or a need to be right. Either way, it's based in ego. It can be dishonest, guarded, judgmental, dismissive, and desperate, full of interruptions and arguments. Someone practicing superficial communication is never truly listening, but always thinking of what to say next and how to get their point across in a way that will convince the other person. Sometimes South Node Gemini 3rd house people believe they are truly listening when what they're really doing is selective listening. So even if they're not consciously focused on getting their own point across, they can still be focused on satisfying their ego by taking in only what confirms their bias and what makes them feel comfortable. They can make assumptions and be impatient or distracted by other thoughts. Motive is key here. Their motive must be to achieve mutual understanding, not to win or dominate or persuade. South Node Gemini 3rd house people may encounter many people in their lives who simply don't listen to them, and this is meant to mirror their own behavior and challenge them to lead by example. Once they lead by example, others will follow suit and actually listen to them. Once they learn to truly listen with empathy and authenticity, they approach conversations with sincere curiosity and a desire to fully understand the other person's truth. This style of communication can mean they're both challenging and vulnerable, as they're less focused on pleasing the other person and more motivated by deeply understanding and communicating the truth. Mastering deep communication helps them establish authentic trust with others. They then come from a healthier ego, one that is both humble and confident. They are honest, transparent, and assertive, but also compassionate, respectful, and appreciative. This requires a very healthy level of ego that is very difficult to attain. It's not enough to simply practice these traits, but to deeply reorient our self-concept and relationship to ourselves and the world. This is not just deep communication, it's deep work. There is no shortcut here. South Node Gemini 3rd house people must practice listening and understanding without judging, both themselves and others. They can listen to themselves by journaling, speaking into a voice recorder, practicing a creative hobby, or simply letting their mind wander while they do menial tasks. As they do so, they will be able to distinguish between the thinker and the observer within. There is the stream of thought and there is the one who is aware of thought. Through meditation, they can practice identifying more and more with the observer than the thinker, and instead of judging their thoughts, they can simply accept them as information that teaches them about themselves. As they practice listening deeply to themselves, they will get better at doing it with others. When they are in conversation, North Node Sagittarius 9th house people can focus on understanding without judging. They can ask questions and repeat back to the person what they believe they understand the person to be saying. Then the other person will be able to either correct their understanding or they will feel profoundly understood and validated. A wonderful gift to give someone. Intuition versus indecision. South Node Gemini 3rd house people are so good at seeing all perspectives that they get confused and struggle to make decisions. They see the validity in every position and become paralyzed by the paradox of choice. However, when they slow down and pay attention, before their mind runs away with all the possibilities and pros and cons, they will notice an intuitive knowing, a gut feeling that tells them what they really want deep down. This intuition is completely accurate, they just have to learn how to recognize it and allow themselves to follow it. When they follow their intuition, they'll always be on track. Even when South Node Gemini 3rd house people have made a decision, they can't help but second-guess themselves. This comes from a deep insecurity. They're so accustomed to tuning into and relying on others' perspectives that not only do they not trust their own, but they don't know which perspective is their own. They have become too reliant on others and now they have to rely on themselves. This tendency to second-guess themselves also comes from a habit of trying to apply logic to everything when logic doesn't work for everything. Since the Enlightenment, people in the West have lived in a rigidly logical society that systematically invalidated any other form of knowledge. Often South Node Gemini 3rd house people try to apply logic to intuitive decisions, and this is what messes them up, causing them to second-guess and invalidate whatever decision they made long after the fact. As a result, they become so internally conflicted that they have no stable base. This process is very painful. Ultimately, all their second-guessing leads to an invalidation of every point of view, so that even a win-win situation becomes a lose-lose situation. Often this is because they are viewing things through a black and white perspective. There is a right choice and a wrong choice. Or, rather, every choice is grey, so what does it matter? No matter what they choose, they're wrong and they're at a loss. This just makes them more insecure and self-doubting. Deep down, these folks fear making mistakes and having to live with regret. But when they look back over their life, they'll see that the times they made mistakes were when they listened too much to logic or to other people, while the decisions they don't regret are usually the ones they made based on intuition. It helps in the first place to let go of this fear of making mistakes. They also need to release their fear of missing out. FOMO, what's meant for them won't miss them. This requires them to develop a level of faith in life that's new and scary for them. Often, South Node Gemini 3rd house people equate fear with logic, but this is not the case at all. They believe that logic will protect them, but more often than not, their logic is not so logical, but only leads to self-fulfilling prophecies. For example, they might logically believe that their crush doesn't like them because they don't show clear signs of liking them, even though they intuitively feel that person's affection for them whenever they're together. But their logical lower mind will talk them out of it, so they never make a move and learn only years later, when it's too late, that their crush really did like them all along. If only they'd followed their intuition. It was their fear of rejection trying to protect them, and it backfired. Logic, more often than not, simply leads to pessimism. To follow their intuition, North Node Sagittarius 9th house people need to tune into their feelings, especially how their emotions physically manifest in their bodies. Anything that gives them a sense of positivity, expansion, and vitality indicates a win. Whatever makes them contract, anxious, or pessimistic is a no. They must be careful to listen only to their body and their higher mind when they do this, not their lower, thinking mind or other people. Remember, anxiety screams, intuition whispers. Of course, this is easier said than done. These folks have spent many lifetimes invalidating their own intuition and following the facts instead, and they may have grown up in a family or culture that reinforced this. It's difficult work to overcome this and hear our own inner voice. Practicing self-awareness, by journaling and tuning into the body, on a daily basis is the way to improve. Inner authority. South Node Gemini 3rd house people tend to seek external authority due to a lack of confidence in their own inner authority. They invalidate their own intuition and focus on what they believe they should do or what others want them to do or whatever plan their culture has laid out for them. They need to be very skeptical of the beliefs they've internalized from their environment. To discern whose perspective they should be open to, they need to work at identifying others' motives, both in life and towards them specifically. This will reveal whether or not they can trust each person. South Node Gemini third house folks often drive the people around them crazy by asking for everyone else's input, and usually people aren't comfortable giving their opinions because they feel it's something the South Node Gemini third house person needs to decide for themselves. Alternatively, people could offer their opinion only for the South Node Gemini third house person to rebel against it. Deep down, they feel their intuition pulling them in the right direction, but logically, they want to check each decision with everyone else they know. Deep down, South Node Gemini third house people believe they lack something essential, something that should give them strength and self-assurance. What they're overlooking is, of course, their own self. Due to having been so enmeshed in others' ideas and voices, they have a deep need to tune into their spiritual connection. This need is so vital that they will never be able to navigate life without it. Thus, their primary aim in this incarnation is to take up their hero's journey, the true spiritual journey. Once they begin this quest, everything else will become easier, their inner voice will become louder, and they'll be able to follow their intuition. Of course, authenticity also involves self-acceptance. Naturally, the more they accept themselves, the less they need the acceptance of others, but as always, that's just when others will begin to accept them. We can always have what we want as soon as we stop wanting it. South Node Gemini third house people deeply crave understanding and acceptance, we all do. But their means of pursuing it is too often insincere, manipulative, or simply based on others instead of on themselves. They are constantly anticipating how other people will react to their words and behavior. What will really help them fulfill their desires is authenticity. This can be an enormous relief to the people around them, who are grateful for the truth. Instead of being a voice for other people, they need to become the voice of their own higher self. It's just hard for them sometimes to cut through all the information in their heads and reach the clear voice within them. The problem is that they actually value others' opinions more than their own. It can be extremely frightening for them to grow out of this, and in fact, that growth is frequently forced upon them, sometimes in brutal ways. They will often be targets of gossip, slander, and manipulation. This is teaching them how not to behave towards others, as well as to detach themselves from others' opinions. They are simply too socially preoccupied, failing to value themselves properly. They must learn to see conflict as an opportunity to speak their truth and to either get closer to those who are right for them or to leave behind those who don't align with them. The point is that their priority must be their own truth, which they must not abandon for others. Instead of basing their decisions on how other people will react, they must learn to act first and then see how it changes others' reactions. It helps North Node Sagittarius 9th house people to go within and define their own perspective and opinions before discussing the issue with others. Otherwise they run the risk of subjecting themselves to someone else's will or opinion and robbing others of their own honesty and authenticity, which also means robbing others of an opportunity to expand and grow. The challenge is to get in touch with themselves in the first place. There are many suggestions for how to do this in the North Node Sagittarius 9th house workbook on northnodesignandhouse.com. Too often these folks subscribe to someone else's paradigm and philosophy, then impose it on other people in turn. This is because deep down, they don't trust themselves to find the truth on their own, beyond the limits of an external structure. They may have been raised in culturally rigid or strictly religious households, even if that religion was science or atheism. Either way, they likely had someone else's idea of the truth imposed on them and weren't allowed to discover their own inner truth. What they must do now is pay attention to the lessons of their own life. Life is constantly trying to teach us, but we ignore it in favor of external authorities, books, media, etc. But any received belief system blocks them from the truth. Life itself is the only real authority. What North Node Sagittarius 9th house people are realizing is that they need spiritual help, straight from the universe itself, to make decisions and reach their goals. They just have to learn to listen to that instead of to other people. At the bottom of everything they will discover that their own personal truth is identical with universal higher truth. Relationships. Like everyone else, all of South Node Gemini third house people's bad habits can sabotage their intimate relationships. Their tendency to stick to superficial topics, over-communicate, and manipulate others help them feel more secure in the short term, but ultimately drive others away. Because they see themselves through the eyes of others, sometimes they inadvertently misrepresent themselves to seduce someone. The problem is that these folks are so inclined to adapt to the other person's agenda that they easily suppress their authentic self and desires. After a while, they become resentful. After all, they've spent all this time changing to be the perfect partner to this person. Why doesn't this person do the same thing for them? What they don't realize is that we shouldn't change ourselves for a relationship. A good relationship naturally leads us to grow. But to try to present oneself as someone's ideal is very disingenuous. When the South Node Gemini third house person's true self comes out, their partner feels deeply betrayed by all the lies, spoken and unspoken, and the foundation of trust crumbles beneath their feet. It isn't fair to the partner who opens themselves up only for the South Node Gemini third house person to suddenly change their mind and leave, physically or by detaching emotionally. In fact, it's likely they've been on both sides of this dynamic. The truth is that South Node Gemini third house people don't trust that their authentic self is lovable. It's cliché, but it's true. We have to love ourselves first. But it's not necessarily because our self-love is more important or powerful. It's because we won't be able to accept love from another person until we prove it to ourselves first. Only then will we be able to let our guard down, show someone who we are, and know that even if it doesn't work out, we'll be okay, because we love ourselves. Our self-love and self-acceptance is the safety net we need to venture out into the world and into relationships with others. We need to trust that we've got our own back. They can really only make their relationships work by tuning into both their own authentic self and working to understand the other person. When they honor the uniqueness of the other person, without trying to adapt to or become like them, the other person feels seen and is able to reciprocate. Then the North Node Sagittarius ninth house person can know for sure whether this person is the right match for them, and whether their dreams and values are truly aligned. With their logical approach, South Node Gemini third house people can fall into the trap of choosing someone who looks good on paper but isn't good for them in reality. The logical option usually isn't right for them in the long run, and not just in love, but in career and other areas of life too. The person, or other thing, that truly makes them happy usually surprises them. It's usually not the type they thought they'd want. Deep down, they know how they truly feel, but because they're so disconnected from their intuition, they override their true feelings. Of course, if they are not radically authentic from the start, they will end up with the wrong partner. They must absolutely not use logic to choose a partner, selecting only who looks good on paper or checks all their silly boxes. They must learn to trust their intuition when it comes to discerning between potential partners and friends. Often, after selecting the wrong partner, South Node Gemini third house people proceed to create an artificial sense of harmony through a combination of manipulation, people-pleasing, and chameleon-like adaptation. Eventually they come to resent the fact that they cannot be themselves in the relationship, but it's them who made it that way. When they finally explode and say that they cannot be themselves with their partner, the person is flabbergasted, because all along they trusted the South Node Gemini third house person to be real with them. It's a deep betrayal, but South Node Gemini third house people deceive and betray themselves most of all. They can even create a codependent bond, and in time their North Node Sagittarius ninth house urges them to escape. Their karmic destiny is one of freedom, independence, and adventure. That doesn't mean they can't settle down, but that their relationships need to allow them this space. As with everything else, making time for solitude to get in touch with their authentic voice and communicating directly and authentically will save them a lot of trouble. What North Node Sagittarius ninth house people really need to commit to is themselves, their higher selves and authentic inner truth. These folks must especially guard against a subconscious tendency to manipulate their partner. They think they can change or help their partner, but that simply means that they never accepted the person in the first place. But a relationship attained through manipulation continues to require constant manipulation, whereas one based on truth requires fewer mental acrobatics. When it comes to physical intimacy, South Node Gemini third house people can stay stuck in their heads, never fully coming down into their bodies. They are so often caught up in their mental processes that they're not fully present with their partner. These folks need to ground. There are plenty of root chakra and other grounding techniques included in the North Node Sagittarius 9th House workbook on northnodesignandhouse.com. Instead of trying to logically figure out sex, it helps to shift their attitude to viewing sex and intimacy as an adventure, one to feel their way through intuitively. Going out to go within. Wordsworth wrote about the inward eye, which is the bliss of solitude, and that's what North Node Sagittarius 9th House people are here to experience. They are accustomed to being surrounded by others though, and solitude may be a scary thing for them. But when they get away from people, they find the clarity they seek. Once they get over the initial anxiety, they develop a sense of peace and well-being. As others' ideas and opinions slowly evaporate from their mind, they can find their authentic truth. North Node Sagittarius 9th house people need to venture out to go within. It's very healthy for them to retreat from society and spend time outside. Being in cities can overstimulate them. Connecting with nature helps them connect with their own inner nature. It expands their worldview and helps them see the big picture, looking at society and their little problems from the outside. Animals are also good for North Node Sagittarius people. It helps them tune into the simplicity of life and remember what's important. Deep down, they crave simplicity. Traveling alone can be especially beneficial for these folks. It helps them understand the transience of everything and teaches them to hold more lightly to their usual ideas and ways of being. Through travel, they realize the only thing in their lives that is constant, themselves. These folks are learning to create freedom both within and without. It's hard for them to do just one or the other, because life is not divided into an inner process and an outer process. It is one unitive, flowing process. To liberate themselves psychologically, they often have to liberate themselves physically. North Node Sagittarius 9th house people are getting in touch with the nomadic nature of humankind. For millions of years our ancestors traveled in small groups, never rooting anywhere for too long but instead trusting that nature would provide for them. Many people still live this way, and have been consistently proven to live healthier, happier lives on average than those in civilization, where sitting is the new smoking and chronic disease rampages through our bodies. Although they may have a million logical excuses as to why they shouldn't venture out, once they finally bite the bullet and go, North Node Sagittarius 9th house people will not only gain a confidence they've never known, but life will bring them serendipitous situations and fated encounters that will change their lives. Integrity, values, belief systems. In all their accumulation of information and appreciation of the relativity of different perspectives, what South Node Gemini 3rd house people have really been searching for is a reliable truth on which to base their lives. They yearn to stand on a solid foundation that they can always trust. That foundation is their own moral compass, provided by their higher self. In the past, they've achieved their goals and ensured their survival through playing the social game strategically and effectively. But this strategy can't work forever. In this life, people will no longer respond to their words and behavior in the ways they predict. They will suffer painful consequences until they develop a higher law within themselves. Sticking to their values is the only way to protect themselves. North Node Sagittarius 9th house people must release their concern about what everyone is thinking and simply do what they believe is right. They must learn to follow their conscience, which means tuning into their intuition and inner knowing. This can be challenging since they have to clear the clutter of their mind in order to hear their inner voice, but once they learn to do this, they will discover their inner voice is loud, clear, and unassailable. They can trust their gut reactions. Of course, this isn't always easy, especially when their intuition guides them to act in ways contrary to popular belief or conventional wisdom. They may feel foolish when they start on this path, but often they have no other choice. After so much time wasted on conventionally logical decision-making, their lives fall apart and they get tired of not getting what they want. The backwards law is relevant here: the harder we try, the more our efforts boomerang and the more we fail. It's only once we let go of our attachment to results that what we want comes to us, usually in a form we didn't expect. North Node Sagittarius 9th house people are being forced to try a different route. They must simply trust their gut, take a leap of faith, and believe in themselves. Paying attention to feelings rather than thoughts is what helps them tune into their intuition. As much as they can, they need to follow those choices that make them feel lighter, freer, and expanded. They must be wary not to confuse this with the puffing up of the ego, though. If they feel self-righteous, they are off track. This often means choosing the speech and actions that will lead them to increased self-respect. That's why motive is so important for these folks, because it's their intention, not their action, that will determine the result. When they disobey their conscience, they forego their right to divine protection, and the consequences can be severe. In Eastern astrology, the 9th house is the house of Dharma, the law of one's nature, the purpose of one's being. It's an incredibly auspicious house, and once North Node Sagittarius 9th house people begin to follow their spiritual path and live their authentic truth, they reap incredible karmic rewards. It is in the 9th house that we unite with our higher self, the superconscious self within all of us. More than anyone else, these folks benefit from following their curiosity through philosophical and spiritual texts, finding their own unique path. There are many references to consider in the North Node Sagittarius 9th House workbook on northnodesignandhouse.com. Following their higher self is the best way for these folks to serve others, especially by infusing truth into daily life. The spiritual path is indispensable for them because it is the only reliable source of strength, vitality, and certainty they will find. It is their path to peace and freedom. Appreciate the gold. Before we conclude, I want to remind you to appreciate the gold in the shadow of your South Node in Gemini in the 3rd house. Remember that following your nodal path is not about completely abandoning your South Node, but appreciating the innate skills you bring into this life while putting intelligent boundaries around those behaviors you take to excess. South Node Gemini 3rd house people are fantastic friends, neighbors, and siblings. They tend to be genuinely fun people who love to connect with others and have a good time. They sincerely want the best for others and think about their community, often bringing an attitude of selfless service into daily life. They are the connectors, networkers, and social butterflies who help bring shy people out of their shells and teach people how to bond. These folks are also incredibly intelligent, so much so that few people can keep up in a conversation with them. They have an endless stream of facts, thoughts, and information to contribute, culled from their diverse interests. Their curiosity is infectious and inspiring. South Node Gemini 3rd house people can also bring steadying logic to situations that could otherwise go awry. When their loved ones are freaking out, theirs can be the calming voice of reason that brings people back to reality and helps them make better, more practical decisions. They can be sharp observers who bring incredible social skills to the table, facilitating diplomacy and understanding between those too hot-headed or self-absorbed to see others' points of view. They are wonderful at smoothing over conflict and helping people empathize with one another. Our South Node isn't only about what we get wrong or do to excess, it also includes what we've mastered and can teach to others. No quality is wholly good or bad, but each one has both a light and a dark manifestation. Once we learn how to express our South Node in a healthy way with good boundaries, aware of its dark side, we can reach back for the gold in the shadow and share its light. We can teach others the skills we've mastered, leading by example and helping others learn their Gemini lessons. Once it is balanced, our South Node also becomes the foundation for our North Node. As with everything, each archetype contains the seed of its opposite, like the yin-yang symbol. It is precisely because South Node Gemini 3rd house people understand the intellectual perspectives others so well that they are able to turn their skills inward and finally give themselves what they've hitherto only given others. It is through this balance they can finally find the inner truth for which their soul deeply yearns. Further practice and inquiry. I hope this ebook has been illuminating for you on your personal quest for growth. In all my work, my goal is to help raise the collective level of human consciousness. We are each responsible for doing so, by taking responsibility for our own individual piece of consciousness. With the information I've communicated here, I hope you feel more empowered to take care of your own. I wish to communicate a few more things to look for which may be helpful. First, I didn't just want to dump theory on you. As I wrote these ebooks, I realized there were so many references, books, videos, podcasts, as well as reflection questions and practical actions, that could help you think and problem solve in even more ways, in ways I didn't have the space to delve into in this ebook alone. Conscious of the fact that reading theory is just the tip of the iceberg, I wanted to give you practical ways of applying your new knowledge to your life specifically. That's why I created a workbook for each nodal placement on northnodesignandhouse.com. Recommendations for books, movies, videos, podcasts, and more provide food for thought and explorations of the Gemini 3rd house/Sagittarius 9th house themes. Journal prompts and activity recommendations lead you off of the screen and into the world, where you can be empowered to make a difference in your own life. Even though this book series on the nodes specific to sign and house is a huge leap forward in the collective project of astrological study, each chart is so completely unique that there are still more factors that may influence your specific experience. For some, the path is easier, for others, it seems to be blocked at every turn. While I don't want to overwhelm you with information, focusing simply on the information above is already an enormous project. If you ever feel blocked or confused, here are a few keys in your chart to consider. First, consider your big three: Sun, moon, and ascendant, in context of your nodal placement. Ask yourself, why would a soul with these nodal challenges choose a personality with these big three? For example, a North Node Sagittarius 9th house is most likely to have an Aries ascendant, and let's say they have a Libra sun with a Pisces moon. With an Aries ascendant, the Sunday may be in the 7th house and the moon may be in the 11th or 12th. Clearly this person needed a strong outer persona in the form of the Aries ascendant, so they already have some of Sagittarius's fiery passion. Their early experiences may have been tough and required them to fight for their own survival, intellectually or emotionally or even physically. They may have a stronger connection to their authentic self than most South Node Gemini people. But their Pisces moon makes them very compassionate and sensitive, while the Libran sun helps them understand others intellectually, and these qualities are challenging for the North Node in Sagittarius in the 9th house. The Libra sun is likely placed in the 7th house. Partnership is especially important for this person, exacerbating some of the South Node Gemini challenges of minimizing their own identity and conforming to others. The North Node indicates the need for independence, so this Sun-Moon combination challenges them. However, the Libra Sun and Aries Ascendant may still make commitment difficult for them, especially when the wishy-washy Pisces Moon is added to the mix. While they may have an easier time empathizing with and understanding others, it's hard for them to settle down and commit, and they may prefer to flit from place to place, partner to partner, friend group to friend group. Second, consider any aspects made to the nodes, less than 4 degrees. You can find plenty of articles online by searching for any relevant aspects, but for the sake of simplicity I will note here that harmonious aspects, trines and sextiles, help, conjunctions challenge, and squares indicate a skipped step, a karmic lesson one completely missed and must redo. In our hypothetical Libra Pisces chart, let's suppose the Libra Sun is trine the South Node and sextile the North Node. Remember, an aspect to one end of the nodal axis is simultaneously an aspect to the other end. The Sun indicates they still need to use some of the detached, intellectual air qualities of Gemini. On the flip side, the Pisces Moon could square the nodal axis. Since squares represent a skipped step, this person may be underdeveloped emotionally, having a hard time accessing and reading their own feelings as well as others. With the moon likely placed in the 12th house, their emotional nature may be completely unconscious, hindering their capacity for compassion and deep self-awareness. You can see in this example how the aspects change the interpretation of the placement. If the Pisces moon were not squaring the nodal axis, the native would be more emotionally self-aware and it would help more than hurt their growth. However, if it were square, the opposite would be true. Regardless, the potential for a compassionate emotional nature is there, it just depends on the level of consciousness. Third, the rulers of the nodes carry enormous weight. In your case, the South Node is ruled by Mercury and the North Node is ruled by Jupiter, which is another reason your nodal lessons play out in the realms of intellect, belief systems, and communication. The houses of these planets indicate challenges and opportunities, respectively. For example, let's say our hypothetical Libra Pisces person has their Mercury conjunct their Aries ascendant. It's likely they're extremely communicative and have a strong need to talk, especially when they first meet people. While others immediately perceive their intelligence, this excessive communication may overwhelm calmer, quieter types. Learning to rein this in and manage it intelligently is going to be a major challenge for this person. On the flip side, let's say they have Jupiter in Aquarius in the 11th house, likely trine their South Node and sextile their North Node. The harmonious aspect Jupiter is making to the nodes indicates this placement is helpful. It concentrates their expansive, generous energy, Jupiter, on the collective, 11th house, and their means of sharing can actually be quite detached and calm. Aquarius, once they tap into it. Their North Node in Sagittarius in the 9th house is inviting them to step back, detach, and share their ideas in a calm and impersonal way that can truly benefit the world. It would be the task of many lifetimes to interpret every possible configuration of Big Three, nodal aspects, and nodal rulers in combination with each nodal placement. It has taken me many years just to write these 144 ebooks on the signs and houses of the nodes. But I hope this example has given you a clue of how to suss out any additional challenges or blocks your particular chart may represent. If you're not sure, I recommend finding an astrologer who specializes in the nodes and can interpret your chart specifically. If and when I am personally available, I will make it known on the website. Famous North Node Sagittarius 9th house individuals. Learning about the lives and choices of your fellow travelers can help you see both healthy and unhealthy ways of leveraging your South Node wisdom and pursuing your North Node purpose. Dennis Diderot, Tycho Brahe, John Calvin, Yo-Yo Ma, Hunter S. Thompson, Billy Graham, Anna Pavlova, Edwin Moses, Jean de La Fontaine, William Lilly, Cardi B, Isabella Gianni, Jimmy Fallon, Barbara Palvin, Heinrich Himmler, Meghan Trainor, François Cluzet, Bjorn Borg, Jean-Baptiste Morin de Villefranche, Vida Guerra, Vladimir Vysotsky, Auguste Lumiere, Zucchero, Margot Fontaine, Amy Fisher, Steve Reich, Dorothy Hamill, Kurt Anandaswamy, Marcelo Del Debbio, Katie Tunstall, Madeleine Renaud, Monty Don, Rosemary Kennedy.